Happy Wednesday, happy upcoming week 6 to the NFL season, everyone. Welcome to the Seahawks FanTable. With me is Zeb and Dustin, and we have a guest today. We've got Dustin Brown AMD on the Twitter if you want to try and look for him.
Ahoy.
Hey,
Ciao.
So, you might be wondering where one of our normals are, and unfortunately Ross has bronchitis, so he got put on the questionable list, and we decided he wasn't going to be on the active roster today, so we pulled up someone from the practice squad, and that's Dustin. Dustin's going to help us out today. So Dustin, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm just happy to have the opportunity. Thanks, first of all, to God. And, a normie gets sick, you got to reach out and get an unnormal person. So I'm happy to be that for you.
Well, I appreciate that. For all the fans that are listening live, thank you for tuning in. For the people that listen to us on YouTube, on SoundCloud, thank you so much. We're in week 6, guys. It's a 3-1 Seahawks team. I know a lot of us probably wanted them at 4-0, but I think you could ask almost anyone, and I think you have to be happy with where they are, especially those last 2 games. That game on the road, 10 a.m. against the New York Jets, I was pretty happy with it. What do you guys feel?
Week 6? Feels like week 5.
It technically is our week 5 because we had the bye, but yeah.
I like where we're at. I like the way the team has progressed thus far. I'm happy to be sitting at 3-1 at this point in the season, and hopefully getting healthier.
Yeah, normally I hate the early bye, but it just worked out really well for us this season with injuries. Honestly, we've had so many injuries. I feel like we got really lucky with the bye, and starting off 3-1 is a great start.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's really interesting is obviously everyone was really upset about the week 2 loss to the Rams and quality win for the Seahawks, quality opponent in week 3 against the Niners, then another quality win against not necessarily a great opponent in the Jets in week 4. But being 3-1 puts them in a great position. They're leading the NFC West. They are looking like the best team because they're the healthiest. Their quarterback play has been the most consistent, even with the injuries to Russell Wilson. But they look like one of the better teams. I mean, you look at the other favorites early in the year. You look at the Cardinals, and I think people have a lot of questions about them. You have the Panthers, who are 1-4, and there's even more questions about them. So I think for the most part, you have to be as happy as you possibly can be with 3-1.
I think that the Cardinals and the Panthers are probably questioning themselves at this point. What the hell's going on in those cities?
Yeah. Yeah, statistically, they say that if you start the season 1-4, you have a 6% chance to make the playoffs.
Yeah, it's just not happening.
That's crazy.
The last team to do it was last year. The Kansas City Chiefs actually went on a 10-win win streak when they were 1-5, which is so insane to think about, a team being able to win just 10 wins in a row, because once you've got that 6th loss, I mean, it just puts you in such precarious position where you can't win on your own. You have to have a lot of other teams lose in order for you to get helped.
Yeah.
So since including the Super Bowl, the Panthers have gone 1-5. Is that right?
Yep.
I also read there's apparently a bizarre Panthers stat that they've alternated winning and losing seasons for like 10 years straight.
Yeah. Which is interesting. They're actually the first 3-time repeat winner of the NFC South in the entire history of the most recent reallocation of the divisions. So since the inception, I think that's maybe like 2002,
2002, yeah.
You know, once the Seahawks moved to the NFC West, it's the first time any team in the division had, let alone back-to-back division champions, but back-to-back-to-back division champions. And obviously they went 7-8-1 in one of those years.
Yeah, that's a different team wins that division every year, or at least that was the trend for a decade or so, right?
Yeah, and it looks like that's going to be the case again this year. I mean, obviously it's a new team coming up and potentially winning that division, because right now you've got the front runner of the 4-1 Falcons, which happen to be coming to town this Sunday. Actually, they're already in town. They played in Denver stayed on the West Coast, and they've actually been hanging out with a couple Seahawks, I believe.
Yeah, I think Russ took a few of them to the hospital to volunteer.
Yeah, I saw that on Facebook and on Instagram. Russell Wilson took a couple of the other players. I think it was Devontae Freeman over to the Seattle Children's Hospital, which is a pretty cool thing for him to do.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Well, what I want to talk about here real quick is this is probably I would say a surprise. Like, I don't know if anyone would think that a Week 6 matchup between the Falcons and the Seahawks would be one of the better matchups in Week 6. I know there are a bunch of other teams playing, but usually you don't see back-to-back weeks where you've got the Broncos, who I believe were undefeated at that time, playing against a 3-1 Atlanta Falcons team. They win on the road, and then they're now coming on the road again to play another division-leading team in the Seattle Seahawks. I think that's pretty rare.
It's a big game for this early in the season, and yeah, then have to go back to back against two top teams like that. Although the Broncos might have been kind of, I know the defense is strong, but what they've been pushing out at quarterback, they're pretty lucky to be in the position they were in. So, but yeah, a big early game in the season for both us and the Falcons. I think it's gonna be pretty. The result of this game is going to be pretty telling as to the actual strength of the two teams.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Falcons lost their very first game of the season, right? And then now they're and so they're on a 4-game win streak. And if it wasn't for that Rams game, which I went to actually, and was probably the worst game I've ever been to in my life in person. We've got a little win streak going. You can't count the Rams because they're the Rams. This has actually got some early season playoff implications. I think we're looking like two of the top 3 or 4 teams in the NFC.
Yeah, and what's interesting is if you were able to have a crystal ball, a lot of people were thinking that this is. I think Week 6 is the first week that teams can get flexed into Sunday night. But you have to give, I think, a 12-week window or a 12-day window in order to actually flex the game. There are a lot of people that hoping that this game would have been flexed to Sunday night, which would have made a really, really big impact on what the outcome of this game means. Not just because it's prime time, but because you have teams that at the end of the year might be fighting each other for a seeding position, and a head-to-head win means so much.
Yeah, they don't want us
to
play prime time.
Seahawks have been banned from prime time, haven't we?
I don't think they've banned us, but they definitely don't want to give us any games. I can't. Yeah. Outside of playoffs, I can't remember the last primetime game the Seahawks have lost.
And I don't think they've been close either.
Maybe it was the Niners in 2012.
The Christmas game that was
yeah.
No, it was earlier in the season. It was the game at San Francisco. I believe it was a Monday night, or I could be wrong. It might have been a Thursday.
I want to say that was like a 17 or like a 13-6 game, like a 1-score.
Yeah, exactly. It was something like that for sure.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like that's what that early Harbaugh, Pete Carroll kind of game would have been.
Yeah. But it was fun.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about history. Let's talk about this last win that we saw. On the last podcast, we talked about whether or not we thought Russell Wilson should play. We were mostly unanimous in saying that yes, he should play, but if they're winning big, take him out early. We all saw him play. He put up great numbers. He had over 300 yards passing. He passed to 3 different people. He passed to the 5th wide receiver in Connor McAvoy. He passed to the guy that they had picked up 70 hours ago in CJ Spiller. Then they passed to the backup turned starter in Kristen Michael. Those were the 3 people that caught touchdowns. Hauschka kicked a couple field goals. And if not for a crazy fluke offensive fumble that got returned for a touchdown, that game was pretty much a blowout. It would have been 27-10. That extra touchdown definitely skews the score. What were your thoughts out of that game? I know we talked a lot about it, Dustin. We talked about it, outside of the podcast, but it was a really, really surprising game to me. I didn't think that it would go exactly like I wanted it to go in my head. What were your guys' thoughts? Dustin, you want to kick us off?
Did we lose him?
Yeah, Dustin, I don't know if we lost you, but Zeb, why don't you go ahead and go?
Well, I liked the game was great overall. That one kind of bullshit touchdown, that sucks. The score definitely would have looked a lot better without it, but it happened. I kind of makes me question that rule a little bit. Like maybe that needs to be looked at. Not that it's ever been a problem before, but it's a cheap touchdown, and I wouldn't mind if that was something they would look at.
Yeah, it's a weird rule because if that play happens 16 seconds later after the 2-minute warning, they can't progress a fumble.
Exactly.
Which I think is kind of weird. It's such a fluky kind of play, and there's so much unknowns about what is a forward pass, what is a fumble until the whistle blows. I think you definitely give defenses, not a lot of notice, and I think that makes it a little bit tougher for them, especially because a late hit potentially puts them at risk of drawing a flag, getting a 15-yard penalty, and then letting a drive continue when many other times they might assume that that's not a play, that's a done play, and then they can just move on to the next snap.
Yeah, exactly. But as far as the overall game goes, I was really impressed with Russell Wilson last weekend, or the last game. He does that where he'll put on a clinic just 1 week, and this was kind of his like, oh, you guys don't think I can pass from the pocket, huh? Because his ball placement, especially in the first half or the first 3 quarters, I suppose, was perfect. He was putting that ball exactly where people needed it to be, and it was really cool to see.
Yeah, he was 4 for 4 on passes 20 yards downfield. He had a big play to Jimmy Graham. He had a big play to Paul Richardson, and then that big play to Doug Baldwin. And I forget whoever had the last one. It probably was Jimmy Graham again.
There was a couple of big ones to Jimmy for sure.
Yeah, Dustin, what were you gonna say, man?
Oh, how about the Earl Thomas trying out his referee career? Did you hear him? Did you hear him sneak onto the mic for that play?
Yeah, it was awesome.
What the announcers even said, thank you, Earl Thomas, for keeping that, keeping that G, because most of the players probably would have been cursing up a storm if that was.
Yeah. I just love the idea that he's so intense. He just seems like one of those people you can kind of like see in his eyes, and you hear stories about like practices where he refuses to go half speed. I love the idea of somebody like that intense and also that like appropriate on the mic. It's kind of like a Phillip Rivers type of a weird like dissonance between super intense and super G-rated at the same time.
Yeah, it's a weird balance to strive for and be able to live by. Yeah. Well, let's actually talk about our first subject, which is the ante of our current topic, which is, we talk about quarterback play, we know how important it is, but in the history of the Seahawks, who is your least favorite Seahawks quarterback in franchise history? This is probably an interesting topic because it's going to depend really on how long you've been a fan. I've mentioned that I've been a fan for probably a good 20 years where I've actually been really attentive. Zeb, he's been a fan since the early 80s, I believe. Dustin, just to give people an idea, how long have you been a Seahawks fan?
Well, I'm a baby then. It's just been since the middle of the Hasselbeck years for me. So, I can let you guys go first. I actually dug through the record books to refresh my memory on who exactly the list of Seattle quarterbacks we're talking about is. But I think you guys you've earned the first spot. You've been fans for longer, and I'll wait my turn here.
All right, we'll let Zeb with the fan card go first.
Okay. Well, I specifically asked, who your least favorite quarterback is, not necessarily who the worst is, because that's an argument we could go round and round about, because there's been so many pretty terrible quarterbacks in this franchise. But my least favorite quarterback of all time has to be Rick Meyer, because he was supposed to be the guy to come in and to be the savior. He was the guy that was supposed to come in and finally give us some consistent play at the quarterback position. And instead, he put us through 3 or 4 of the worst seasons in franchise history. So Rick Meyer, for sure, my least favorite. I will say that a couple of guys like Gino Torretta and let's see, Stan Gelbaugh comes to mind, Gail Gilbert. Just some of the backups like Gail Gilbert and Jeff Kemp, like those guys that just you just knew when Craig went down, one of those guys was coming in and we were screwed. Like there was no chance that we were going to do anything.
Yeah, Rick Meyer was definitely before my time, but didn't he get a first round pick? Like someone was like foolish enough to say like, you know what, that guy's worth the first round pick, or is that Dan McGuire that I'm thinking?
No, that was it. It was 1993 draft, I believe. And there, via coin flip, I think the Patriots ended up with the number 1 overall, and we got to pick second. The Patriots picked Drew Bledsoe, and so we took the obvious next choice, which was Rick Meyer Young, the new Joe Montana he was supposed to be.
Yeah, because he came out of Notre Dame.
Yeah, but he was no Joe Montana.
Very few are. All right, I'll go, and then Dustin will let you follow it up. So my least favorite Seahawks is not so much about how he played, but just who he is after he left the team, and it's Trent Dilfer.
Oh, you took my guy.
Yeah, I mean, when Trent Dilfer got signed after his Super Bowl.
Wait, I can swear, right?
You can swear, but
fuck Dilfer.
When he came to Seattle, I thought, okay, great. We have a guy who knows how to play, who runs an offense that it's not gonna really task him. He could probably run Holmgren's West Coast offense to a T. He's not necessarily the guy. He's a former number 1 pick, 4th overall. He should be the guy taking the first snaps, and then that way you can let Matt Hasselbeck kind of groom into it. And I know Hasselbeck had already been in the league for a few years, so it's not like he was like totally brand new. But I thought Trent Dilfer could have been the guy that played well, could have helped us get to wins, build that culture up. They start Hasselbeck. Hasselbeck looks terrible. He gets benched. Dilfer goes on fire at the end of the year. The next season, Holmgren says Trent Dilfer is the starter. Dilfer doesn't play well, gets injured. Hasselbeck comes in, and all of a sudden this big wave of like, surprise and, hope, and, this is finally the guy that's going to be our quarterback, and it ended up being somewhat true. And Trent Dilfer, after that point, he just did not want to be in Seattle. I look back, I try to think about all the times that he's talked about Seattle, and I just don't hear him speak about it favorably. I mean, I know he wanted to be a starter, and they traded him to San Francisco because that was the opportunity for him to start. He did terrible there. But every time I see him now, he doesn't talk about Seattle finally, and that's such a rare thing now in the NFL. I mean, you have Randy Moss, who will talk well about being an Oakland Raider for 1 year, before you ever hear him talk poorly about a franchise. Trent Dilfer doesn't seem to be that way, and he really seems to take it out against the fan base, against the team, and to some degree the ownership. Like, because they didn't treat him well, he will not give them any kind of respect or love, or not even give Russell Wilson a lot of attention that I think he deserves as a top-tier quarterback. So that's why I have Trent Dilfer as my least favorite Seahawk. I hand the thunder over to you, Dustin.
Well, yeah, it's actually interesting because I've been a fan and aware of the Seahawks and football generally my whole life. I grew up in Alaska, where Seahawks fans up there generally. Haven't paid very close attention until after Trent Dilfer's time there. But it just has always struck me as like one of the schmarmiest personalities, and just kind of like going back in time and understanding like historically what his significance was. I think that he was like a medium floor, extremely low ceiling quarterback. He just seems like a guy that was like he had a charmed career, and he very easily could have been somebody that did significantly less. I'm curious to hear from you guys. I actually like watched him play, but my understanding is that like I feel like he could have been like a distraction from Hasselbeck, and maybe like started a significant amount of games that Hasselbeck should have started, and it sort of derailed the quarterback situation here. I just don't like him I don't like him as an analyst. I think that he does this like quarterback school, and his analysis and the things that he says from a quarterback perspective just like strike me as like he's not coming from a position where he's actually played at the highest level. He seems like a try hard or something to me. What was his actual impact on the Seahawks? Like it was early 2000s, right?
Yeah. So I think the Ravens won in 2000, and then he came in the 2001 season, like the last year they were at Husky Stadium, and then that's like before they transition in. It was this really weird situation. Zeb, correct me if I'm wrong here, but he was a backup because he got signed kind of late into the off season, and everyone was kind of surprised that no one had picked him up because he was just coming off a Super Bowl win. And he gets signed by Seattle. Holmgren already declares that Hasselbeck is a starter. Hasselbeck doesn't play well enough to start the year off, and he gets hurt. Dilfer takes over at the end of the year, and they actually see a lot of success. He plays well within the offense. And then the next year, in the 2001 season, Dilfer is named the starter at the beginning of the year. He gets injured, and then Hasselbeck takes over it. So it's almost like a reverse of the last year. But then Hasselbeck makes this huge change, and all of a sudden he plays really well. He commands the offense. He basically started that time in the 2001 season where he kind of just took over and ended up being the guy that Holmgren wanted him to be initially. And then Dilfer never got a chance again. And I think that's where I think that he kind of turned things south.
Like, did you get the vibe that like Trent Dilfer was integral into Hasselbeck's development as a quarterback?
I don't know. Zeb, I have no idea. Do you?
I do feel like after because the way you described it is pretty much how I remember it going down. I do feel like that second season, when they named Dilfer the starter, it was Holmgren trying to say, give Matthews some time to watch, to watch and learn a little bit. So maybe playing behind Dilfer. I don't know. I don't think Dilfer's the best example of a quarterback in pretty much any capacity. He was just a very mediocre quarterback.
Yeah.
So I don't know what kind of things Matt Hasselbeck could have learned from him, but it's possible.
Is Trent Dilfer? Where do you think he lands on like the worst quarterbacks to ever win a ring? Is he on that list?
Oh yeah, he's up there for sure.
Unfairly gets put on there because he actually played well in the playoffs before the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl it was just a bad Super Bowl, them against the Raiders. But he played well in the playoffs to get him to that point. He took over for Tony Banks. I don't know if you guys remember him.
Oh yeah.
Remember him. But Tony Banks was the Ravens quarterback, and he was actually playing pretty well. He gets hurt. Trent Dilfer is the backup. He comes up to finish up the year, and the problem is that Ravens defense is just historically one of the top all-time defenses in a single year. I think the Seahawks are obviously better than them when you look at the stats and you look at kind of everything else. But the problem is everyone looks at the defense 5 times more so than they ever think about the offense. And that's kind of, I think, the problem that Trent Dilfer has. I definitely feel as if his feelings are hurt because he is not recognized as a Super Bowl winning quarterback. He's recognized as a quarterback who happened to be on a defense that won the Super Bowl.
I think that's rightful. I mean, honestly, I followed the Ravens very closely that year. And Dilfer, the best thing you could say about Trent Dilfer is that he did enough to not lose more than they did. That team went 4 straight games without scoring an offensive touchdown.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they went 2-2 in those 4 games. So that defense, as just a one-off, is probably the single best defense in the history of the league for the one season.
Yeah.
Of course, their competition wasn't necessarily all that good either, because that was back when there was like 13 teams in the AFC Central. They were playing the Browns and the Bengals and the Steelers, who weren't great at that point. There was weird quarterback play from them. So Dilfer just was never going to be more than he was as a quarterback.
I looked up his career stats here, and then I'll stop shitting on Dilfer after this. But this says a lot. Career completion percentage of 55%.
Yeah.
113 touchdowns to 129 interceptions.
Uh-huh. That all sounds just about right.
Yeah. But to answer your question a little bit earlier, Dustin,
It's kind of remarkable that he was allowed to start enough games to rack up these stats.
He was in a lot of positions where there wasn't a better option, I think is what it was.
But there are definitely other quarterbacks out there who were not as good and who definitely were not as strong. There were some quarterbacks like Brad Johnson. Brad Johnson's a quarterback that was terrible, and he won it again on the feet of a really strong defense.
Well, Brad Johnson also kind of came into his own at a certain point, and I think became a better passer, considerably better passer than Dilfer ever was, at least for those few seasons. And you can credit that to whatever the system he was playing in or the players that were around him. Who knows exactly, but Trent never had that season or that point where he exceeded expectations as a quarterback, to me, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about bad quarterbacks. We really should be talking about the NFC West.
Yeah.
The NFC West has a really interesting quarterback situation when you look outside of the Seattle Seahawks. So, Dustin, I'm going to start you off. How do you rank each NFC West quarterback situation for the long and short term? Colin Kaepernick is starting again in San Francisco, and Jared Goff can't.
Oh man, I don't know. It's a cluster out here. I mean, there's the Seahawks, and then there's Carson Palmer if he's healthy, and then there's a total dumpster fire between the Niners and then the Rams. I don't understand what happened with Jared Goff, or like if something went wrong with the scouting, or if he had a stroke after they drafted him. It doesn't seem possible to me that he's not even close to starting it. Maybe this is part of some like master plan, but I think that I'm interested to hear your guys' opinion. I think it's safe to say Russell Wilson is a top 5 quarterback in the entire league. He's young, he's healthy. We have a bright future as long as we have him. We're in a very fortunate position. Cardinals, as we've seen, I would probably have to give them the number 2 spot in the short term at least. Carson Palmer, if healthy, we've seen can be very dangerous. Especially he has the right skill set. They like to throw the ball down the field a lot. But if he's healthy is a really big question. Actually, Sam, I think it was you that sent me a link. It was a really interesting website where you'd plug in an NFL player, and it sort of has a human body up on the screen, and it highlights, I think in like red, like different areas that they've had injuries over their career. And it's almost kind of like an actuarial tool. Like it tries to calculate the danger or like the chance of them getting injured again. And at the time, I think it was last year, he was the most likely player in the entire league to get injured again. And so I'm not sure how confident they can be about their future there or what the depth looks like there. I don't think they have the answer on the team. And, the 49ers is really, I can't think of a worse team in the NFL as far as their quarterback situation. I don't mind the publicity for Colin Kaepernick and all of the sort of like off-field activity that he's had with the kneeling during the anthem. I really don't mind it. I mean, my first instinct is to hate anything that Kaepernick does because he's a 49er and because we've been to so many big games with him. But I don't care so much about that. I don't know what happened, if it was between injuries or just like a regression to the mean and his skill set was never actually there. I don't think I've ever actually watched Kaepernick go all the way through a progression. I think he just stares down his receiver and just lets it fly, or he runs. But my official rankings are obviously the Seahawks are number one. Cardinals are a tentative number two now for the short term. I'm not sure what the future holds there. Rams have to be a soft three because I guess there's a chance that Goff pans out. He's a big unknown right now. And the Niners are just like the absolute dumpster fire for me in the NFC West.
Well, I actually have to disagree. I think that with Kaepernick as the starter, the Niners are automatically better than they were with Blaine Gabbert. I think that Colin Kaepernick becomes the second best starting quarterback in the division. That is the caveat being that, to me, Carson Palmer and Drew Stanton are kind of a package deal. Yes, Carson Palmer, when healthy, is probably the second best quarterback in the league, but when is he healthy? You can't really count on it. To me, Colin Kaepernick is not a good quarterback, but he's a good football player. He's kind of a Tebow that kneels for completely different reasons. His mechanics are all fucked up. He gets shaken in his head and he loses confidence, but he does have a strong arm and he throw accurately, and he's probably the best running quarterback in the league at this point. So to me, he gives the 49ers a better chance to win than Blaine Gabbert, who can't complete anything over about 6 yards. And then the Rams, I don't think, do they even have a quarterback? I don't know. They're dead last for sure to me.
It's really interesting, I think, this year when you look at the NFC West, and this is basically just quarterbacks in general. They're so vital to your short-term and long-term success, and every NFC West team has huge question marks. You could almost put them all at like tied for fourth place, because right now the Cardinals are 1-4. They've got a quarterback that's in the concussion protocol. He's potentially not available. He might be able to play this Sunday. It's still up in the air. He wasn't able to go last week. They were able to win. You have the Niners, who were willing to use Blaine Gabbert, who is the most boring quarterback I think you've ever seen. His running ability was probably the best thing they got out of him as a 49er in the time that he was able to play. Kaepernick, I think that the ceiling on him is very low, but you kind of know what you're going to get, and you hope that a coach like Chip Kelly can coach to that. And I think he's proven that he has some ability to do that. Then you look at the Rams, and they're throwing out Case Keenum. I don't even know what school Case Keenum came from. Then you've got a guy who is his backup, who is the number one overall pick, and I can't recall the last time the number one overall pick did not play the first game of the year. He has had 0 snaps. He's been inactive. He has been, it's been reported that he doesn't even know how to take a snap from center. That's still something that he's learning from. So it's a huge, huge question mark, and I think it's really easy to say all these teams, short and long term, don't have an answer, because Carson Palmer, he has to be healthy. If he's not healthy, that team is awful. We've seen what happened to them 2 years ago when Seattle took the number 1 seed out of their hands. It just walked by them. You saw what happened in the playoffs last year when Carson Palmer got hurt. They were totally inefficient. Then you look at the other two teams, in the Niners and the Rams, and they're just been terrible. Their offense has always been something that's kind of held them back from being better than a 500 team. And this is a huge problem for the NFC West. If the NFC West is trying to get back to that level of being respectable, even though it was only a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it's all about the quarterback play. And if you don't have a quarterback, you're going to suck. People won't care. I mean, look at the Browns. The Browns have 6 quarterbacks that have played, and they haven't even played 6 games. That's how bad the team is. That's how bad.
The Browns are
yeah, the Browns
about now.
Yeah, I mean, you look at 6 quarterbacks that have played in your game. One of them is your wide receiver, who also has played safety, who's your wildcat quarterback. I mean, that's a really bad sign. You have to be so thankful through all the injuries that Russell Wilson has never missed a start. I think that's something that we, as we get older, will be something that we are more and more impressed by with what he's done.
We're pretty lucky at this point.
Yeah.
One thing, did you guys watch Hard Knocks?
No, I don't watch Hard Knocks.
That the sun rises in the east and sets in the west.
Who said that?
Like how it's a little air moment.
All right. Well, speaking about the NFC West, let's expand our talks. Let's talk about the NFC as a whole. We've got a division leader coming to town on Sunday, the Atlanta Falcons. There's the Minnesota Vikings, who are 5-0. You've got the Packers, who are having a bye this week. They're 3-1. You've got in the NFC East, you've got the Cowboys, who are 3-1, and then you also have the Eagles. Cowboys are 4-1, and Eagles are 3-1. So you've got all these leaders in the NFC that have been pretty solid. Of these teams, who do you guys think is the real threat? Who do you think is a team that is someone who is really going to be a challenge for Seattle? Is Seattle part of that conversation? Zeb, starts you off. What do you think? Who do you think in the NFC is a team to reckon with?
Well, I'm probably going to be different than what everybody else is thinking, but I think the Cowboys are the scariest team in the NFC. As long as Dak Prescott starts and plays at the level that he's been playing at. Now, obviously, at some point, they're probably going to start Romo again, and that's all going to change because I think they're going to be a completely different team with Romo. But as it stands right now, with Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott running the way he is, I think the Cowboys are the scariest team in the NFC. Minnesota's defense looks scary good. I don't trust Sam Bradford, although he's played well to this point. And the Falcons, they're just kind of that team that always seems like they're really good, and then they start to get beat up, and it kind of all falls apart. So they'll have to get past a certain point to me, for me to have faith that they're going to be one of the better teams in this conference. Green Bay is always, they're going to be tough, and Carson Wentz is playing great in Philly. So they got some pretty good stuff going over there. But overall, I just have this feeling that the Cowboys at the end of the season with Dak Prescott are going to be the ones in the mix, the team that outside of Seattle that you're not going to want to play in the playoffs.
Yeah, Dustin, what do you think, man?
Oh, the thing that's scary about the Cowboys is that we're seeing a rookie quarterback, and we're not seeing a healthy Dez Bryant either. I'm not sure when he's going to come back, or what do you do? Like if you're Jerry Jones or you're Jason Garrett, and I think Tony Romo is supposed to be healthy maybe next week. Do you just plug Tony Romo right in there, or do you see what happens with Prescott?
No, not at all. I would. For me, Romo's benched. He gets the Drew Bledsoe treatment where, Tony, thank you for your time. We love you. We're going to retire you one day. But for now, we've got this young stud. He's taking the reins. He's running the offense. We're winning with him. Tony Romo is done as a Cowboy, in my opinion.
What's the risk? Why? What? I think that, aside from the running, I think that everything that Dak Prescott can do, Tony Romo can do better.
Zeb, do you want to take this first? Because you touched on it, so I want to.
Well, I think that. Well, first off, I will say that I do think that when Romo is healthy and ready to go, they will put him back in. But I think it's a mistake to do that. I like what I see from Dak Prescott. I think Romo, like you said, I think he's done. I think it's time for him to hang him up. I know he's got a lot of money he'd be leaving on the table if he were to do that, so it probably won't happen. I just think for whatever reason, Dak Prescott is just playing the game the way they need it to be played right now. He's doing his job. He's not making mistakes. He looks a little bit like a young Russell out there to me.
Yeah, sure.
And I just think his upside is high. And I think with Romo, we know what we're getting from him, which is a good to great regular season quarterback. And then when it comes down to it, and they need to get those wins towards the end of the season and into the postseason, he just doesn't deliver. So, but I think that when he's healthy, they'll put him back in and they'll regret their decision.
Well, he'll break his back for the fourth or fifth time, right?
Yeah, that's what's going to happen if you put Romo back in. He's such an injury concern.
Sorry, I got a little off on a tangent there about your pick, Zeb. I'm actually going to stay in the NFC East and say that I think that the Eagles are legit. We've seen 4 games and they've only been scored. They've only allowed 51 points over 4 games. Carson Wentz. Everything seems to be clicking on every cylinder. It's weird, and I think we were just talking right before we jumped on before the show started. It's weird to see multiple good teams in the NFC East right now, but I think that it's a small sample size, right? Like we're 4 games in, 5 games in. I think there's a better chance that the 51 points against is an indicator of future performance for the Eagles. And, I expect that defense to be scary and keep them in games all season long.
Yeah. I actually think what you guys are saying, the NFC East, they have 2 quality teams. But what always happens when you have 2 quality teams is they will face each other and they split or one will sweep, and that it changes the entire landscape of their ability to play. So I'm actually going to say the Minnesota Vikings are probably, quote unquote, the scariest team. I don't think they're that great, but what I look at is they play the AFC South. That's 4 easy wins. They play against Detroit. They play against Chicago. That's potentially another 4 wins. So they're already looking at an 8 wins on top of the 1 win they already have over Green Bay at home. They play at Lambeau another time. I look at that defense and I say they are doing enough that Sam Bradford just needs to complete 70% of his passes for 7 yards average, minimal touchdowns, no interceptions, and they're going to do enough to win. I don't think they're good enough to come back. Like, if someone scores like 2 quick touchdowns on them, they're going to scramble. I don't see them being able to climb up and score and score and score. Their ceiling is 24 points. That's what their defense has to lock a team down to, because that's their threshold. They're going to cap out there. They're going to score more than 24 points on any given day, but that's the way that I look at the Vikings. I don't necessarily like them to be the best team in the NFC, but I think they have the easiest path, and sometimes that's what helps you get there. Last year, same thing with Carolina. Carolina was able to just walk through a lot of teams to a number 1 seed, to a 15-1 record, and they just had a very favorable schedule. This year, I think it's the Vikings that have that favorable schedule, and I think that's what's going to make them a little bit harder and give them the benefit of getting a number 1 seed in the NFC. In regards to who I think is a paper tiger, I don't know if obviously the Seahawks are playing Atlanta, and we'll talk more about Atlanta, but I don't believe in their defense. Really quick, we'll talk about this in down later in the podcast, but Atlanta has given up points. They've given 31 to New Orleans. They gave up like 33 to Oakland. They gave up like 30 to Tampa Bay. Those are not bad offenses by any stretch. Especially New Orleans and Oakland. But they just don't have a defense to keep up. And what's going to happen is there's going to be a time where they're not going to be able to stop teams from scoring. Yeah, they can score again and again and again, but their luck is going to run out. And I see them as the team that, on paper, is probably going to be the weakest of potential division winner. Because I still think they have the chance to win that division because every other team in that division looks terrible.
Yeah.
I guess when we talk about like who's a real deal and who's the paper tiger, I mean, I'm pretty optimistic about the Seahawks, but one thing that I guess we should consider is who's going to win out in the playoffs. Who are you going to beat? If the Seahawks are sort of like perennial NFC playoff contenders, who matches up, I guess, right, with the likely winners of each division and like who has the best matchup. And I think when you're talking about the Falcons being a paper tiger, I don't think that they do. I think that like it would have to be a more defensive team that slugs it out and wins a tough game against the Seahawks. I don't see. I mean, we've seen historically great offenses get blown out by the Seahawks. So I think it would have to be more of a defensive team.
Well, that leads us to our next topic. Like, how do you beat the Seahawks? So let's take the vantage point where you're Zeb, you own the Cowboys, Dustin, you own the Eagles, I own the Vikings. What are the chances that that team is able to beat the Seahawks down the road, in the playoffs, home, away, neutral field? What do they need to do to succeed? And that's the blueprint that people are always looking for. We know the Rams have it. Not everyone has the defense that the Rams have, especially that front line. Dustin, what do you think, man? How can the Eagles stand up to the Seahawks?
You're gonna have to win the turnover battle, and it's been a really long time since the Seahawks have lost by more than 9 points. I think you guys might know better than me. I think we lost. We had one 9-point loss. And other than that, we haven't had more than a 7-point loss in the Russell Wilson era. Yeah. So, you're going to have to keep it close, and you're going to have to win the turnover battle and play it all the way through to the end. I think that who we have the most trouble with, if you can dominate at the line and pressure Russell and really keep him contained so that he can't get outside of the pocket and sort of make that like Russell magic happen. It's going to have to be a boring, grinded out game, no mistakes. I think that we're one of those teams where, if we get up 2 scores on you, your win probability falls through the floor. So you have to keep up and go punch for punch. And so they're going to need to get constant pressure, but not only pressure, but to keep Russell contained. And they're going to need to win the turnover battle. I think that they would need a positive 2 turnover differential to have a chance.
Yeah. Seb, what do you think?
I don't know. It's kind of a tough thing to think about, trying to look at it from a different team's perspective. I think obviously we kind of have the bend but don't break style of defense. And so I think a team that's gonna be able to run short plays, little dink and dunk screens, running backs coming out of the backfield and catching passes. Those are the teams that are going to be able to move the ball on us. And then it's who can punch it in, who can actually finish those drives. I think that I don't know. I guess we're going to see this weekend against the Falcons how we're going to stand up to a team with a really potent offense. We obviously, we know what we have in our defense in the Legion of Boom. We know what they're capable of. So I think we're at the point now on offense where we're going to score points assuming Bevel doesn't screw it all up. So it's going to be about who can score on us, who can score touchdowns against us. So yeah, we'll see. And I think the Cowboys again are kind of set up in a manner. They have a lot of good backs, guys that can catch passes out of the backfield that could probably move the ball against us. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. I hope we get to see. I guess we'll talk about this later more. But Richard Sherman and Julio Jones this weekend.
That's the matchup. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm going to echo Zeb almost 100%. The way you beat the Seahawks is you get the under route, you get those 5 to 7 yards that the Seahawks are willing to give you, secure the ball, accurate passes. I mean, really, like if you look at what Ryan Fitzpatrick did with Brandon Marshall and Richard Sherman, the 3 catches that he made, you take out the defensive pass interference that they gave him a catch on. He had 3 catches. One was a 13-yard dig route where he just runs up the field, cuts back, balls there right away. The touchdown was just the perfectly placed back shoulder throw where the DB's on the other side, only the wide receiver is going to be able to touch that ball. And the other one was Brandon Marshall beat Richard Sherman's press, which is a really unique thing. You rarely ever see that. Turned it into a 42-yard reception. Those are 3 perfectly timed, perfectly placed balls. You have to be pinpoint accurate with the Seahawks in order to beat them. And what we know is that is really hard. It is really hard to be pinpoint accurate with the Seahawks when you throw 30 to 35 times a game, because those errant throws have a chance to get tipped, have a chance to turn into an interception, which means that you lost all scoring opportunities. I think that is the one matchup issue that the Seahawks have in facing a Sam Bradford, because he is ridiculously accurate. He is the third most he's the third least likely quarterback to throw an interception. First is Aaron Rodgers, second is Russell Wilson, and then it's Sam Bradford. But the thing is, Sam Bradford can't stay healthy. He can't play a full season. That's why he's not thought of as anything more than a guy that gets injured and basically goes around to other teams. So for the Seahawks to be beat, you have to hit that underthrow. You can't abandon the run game, and that's probably the biggest problem that a lot of these teams face, is they abandon the run game because they just can't get anywhere. They are tired of getting 1 to 2 negative plays when they try to run the ball. Adrian Peterson, when Seattle played in Minnesota in the playoffs, they held him to under 50 yards. This is one of the all-time great running backs, and he was a non-factor. His biggest play was a pass out of the flats that got stripped, turned the ball over, and shut down their scoring opportunity. I don't think that the Vikings have the offense to beat the Seahawks. Maybe their defense can do enough, but I don't think their defense, because Seattle's played that almost identical defense twice and come away a victor, I don't think it's enough. I don't think the addition of Sam Bradford is enough. I think he's definitely an upgrade over Teddy Bridgewater. But I don't think that these teams are built. You look at what the Rams did, and what the Rams did was get timely turnovers and take those 5-yard passes every single time. And what it does is it makes it so the Seahawks don't get time, they don't get the ball, they don't get time of possession, and that hurts their opportunity to get in rhythm, score down the field, and that's what happens. And maybe Minnesota's that team, but I don't think so. Final thoughts?
I think you pretty much covered it.
So we're gonna win the rest of the games, right? We're gonna go 10-0 down the stretch then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or 12. Well, no, there's 12 games left. We'll go 12-0. No one's gonna beat us, right?
There's no doubt about it. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about what we all alluded to. We've got our next opponents, the 4-1 Atlanta Falcons. Number 1 offense, number 1 in scoring, number 1 in passing yards, number 1 in total yards. What impact is this game going to have? Zeb, I'm going to start it with you. We've got this huge matchup. The entire Northwest is going to be watching this game. What are your thoughts, man?
Well, I'm definitely excited for it. I'm looking forward to seeing how we do against this potent offense of the Atlanta Falcons. Again, Julio versus Richard is going to be where my eyes are going to be most of the time. I kind of expect them to get behind our defense at some point and score a big long touchdown. They've done it before. And I think Matt Ryan's gonna take his shots, and he's not a Harvard beard, so he's probably going to have a little bit more success. I guess it's going to be about us limiting their big plays. And then they got those two running backs who kind of seem to be able to do just about anything they want to do these days. So the defense is going to have to come to play. They're going to have to be strong. I don't think that the Falcons have the defense to slow us down if we're clicking like we should be. So I don't want to say it's going to be a shootout because I don't think that they're going to score that many points on us. But I do think we're going to have to score pretty well in order to beat them.
Yeah. Dustin, what do you think, man?
I actually think that our best chance to win is to shut down the running game. And I think that, Zeb, what you're talking about, those pass catching running backs have been a problem, and they're hard to deal with. But, we're averaging just over 80 yards a game rush defense. And I think that there's a decent chance that we can entirely take the run away from them and force Matt Ryan to play a one-sided game where he's passing to win. And if they get in a position to where the run isn't working, we don't have to respect the run. Now they're stuck passing. I think that is the ideal situation for us, and probably the most likely way that the game would just completely get out of hand for the Falcons. Obviously the Julio Jones, I think is in the very top tier, right up there with Antonio Brown as far as everything that you could possibly want from a wide receiver. Is a really scary guy. And a significantly bigger threat than Brandon Marshall is. Brandon Marshall is great, but a little bit older. And if he's capable of ripping off these 40-yard plays, then Julio Jones could be a little scary unless we take away the run. And we know that that's how they have to play us. So I think that the weather might have an effect on this. It's supposed to be really nasty, like storm warning nasty, and I don't know if that'll have an impact on the game plan or there'll be less of a passing game all around.
That's we'll save that.
Yeah,
we got that loaded up next.
Yeah, if that does happen, then it could just be chaos out there. So.
I look at this game like the Steelers game from last year. It's a high-scoring offense, and it's a defense that's not that great. And I definitely see we have a huge advantage defensively, where we will be able to lock down their best receiving threat, just like Richard Sherman did to Antonio Brown last year. I think what's going to happen is Matt Ryan is a good enough quarterback that he's going to find the third, fourth option, and that's maybe where Seattle is going to see the points and the yards come from. So if they can find that, if we can't get home, we can't get to Matt Ryan, that's going to be where they're going to put up the yards. They're going to put up some points. But I look at their defense, and there's no one on that defense that scares me. I have a friend, he's a Broncos fan. He told me that their linebacker who had 4 sacks in that game against Denver, he had like 5 career sacks, and he's played for 3 seasons. So that was like a huge game for him. He never had that kind of production, and that was something that they took advantage of. One thing that we haven't mentioned is the fact that it's Dan Quinn, our former defensive coordinator, who was last with us when we won a Super Bowl. He's the one that's taking over. He was with the team when they lost to New England in the Super Bowl, and he's now in his second year. He started hot last year. He's starting hot this year. I like to give the edge to Seattle because I think if you look at offensively, while I believe they can be very even in some regard, the defense favors Seattle across the board, and I view that our defense is so deep this year that we're not going to allow those third and fourth options to hurt us. And I like how Seattle matches up. If it's inclement weather, it affects both of us, and they're a dome team. They're probably going to be more affected by Seattle because Seattle has that opportunity to get a little bit of the elements by practicing. So I like Seattle. I like what they can do. I like the offense versus their terrible defense, and I like that our great defense can match up really well with their great offense. So we'll see.
We sure will. It's me and Julio down by the schoolyard. I love Julio Jones, man. He is so tight.
He helped me win in my fantasy league. I got him as a late draft pick, and he didn't start off so hot, but the last 10 games of the year, he just went off, and he just cruised me to my playoff win in his rookie year. So I'll be forever grateful for that. And that's when he still had dreads. He still had dreads back in those days.
Yes.
He's
monster, huge. Man.
Yeah, he's monster.
Huge.
He's 6'4", 220 something, 230 something like that, right?
Yeah, he's got to be 6'4", he's got to be 225. He looks really fast. He has to run a 440. He's everything.
Yeah. He is everything. That's what he is. He's everything.
Yeah.
If Richard Sherman shuts down Julio Jones, if Richard Sherman gets consensus he does better than Julio Jones does, what does that do to Richard Sherman's already really, really well-regarded pedigree?
I mean, it's huge. If Sherm can shut down Julio, then everybody's going to be talking about it. So yeah, I think that would be huge. I don't think it's going to happen. I love Sherman. I do think he's one of the best, if not the best, cornerbacks in the game still. But I do think that Julio is that good that he'll get a few on him. But I would love to see it. I'd love to see him shut him down.
Okay, so I just looked it up. Here's the real question, and this makes him even more amazing. Julio Jones' actual name is Quintoris Lopez Jones. So it just somehow gets more badass, the deeper I look. If Sherman can shut down Quintoris, then there's nobody he can't shut down.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you can shut down a guy named Quintoris, that's a whole nother level.
Where did Julio come from? Where did he get Julio? He's like, I'm going with Julio from now on.
Quintoris Julio Lopez Jones. So I don't know. We got to ask him.
we gotta find him on Twitter and hit him up just so we can find out. All right, so we got our last topic, and this is something that Dustin alluded to. Weather, crazy weather coming this Sunday. Windstorms, rain. Does this help us in the battle of the birds? It's Falcons and Seahawks. What, Dustin? I'm going to start off with you. You alluded to it a little bit already, but you're going to be at the game. You're going to be at this game. You're going to be undercover. What are you preparing for? What should the Seahawks? What should the Falcons prepare for?
I think that my intuition has always been to pray for the most dangerous, earth-shattering weather conditions possible. Because I always thought that we would perform better, we'd have more of an advantage. We should be used to it. Our style of play sort of favors, slowing down the passing game. But I just have a couple points here. I started to think about it, and I'm not sure that Russell Wilson is actually good in the rain or in inclement weather. And I'm pretty sure that there's a good chance that Kristen Michael is very bad in the rain, especially with his style of carrying the ball. So I'm going to go against what I normally do. I normally do a rain dance. I normally pray for the ground to open up and swallow the players. But I'm going to hope that the worst is past us and we just play a straight up game and we win without the help of anything supernatural, because I'm worried about Christian Michael especially, and his fumbleitis coming back. And I'm not actually convinced that Russell Wilson is very good in the rain.
Yeah. Zed, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't like the idea of there being an outside factor affecting the way this game goes. I like watching bad weather football. I don't like watching bad weather football when it's the Seahawks, because I don't like to see sloppy football. And if it's raining and windy, that ball's going to be popping out, and it's just that extra factor that isn't related to how good you're playing football. I hate seeing that when it's the Seahawks. So I'm gonna agree with Dustin and hope that by game time Sunday things aren't as bad as it looked like they might be, because at this point it looks like it might be a typhoon.
Yeah.
Oh shoot.
Yeah, it's pretty serious.
Dustin, we're like 3 rain slickers out there, man.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, stay warm out there. Button up.
Normally I bring a golf club with me, but I guess I'll leave it at home this time.
No, to the point that Dustin said, like, yeah, historically Russell Wilson isn't that great in the weather. I don't know if it's because of the weather or if it's just a fluke thing. The NFC Championship game where he had the 4 picks, that was a rainy game. That was just rain. That wasn't anything too crazy. I know that he's played a couple games against the Niners where the rain and the wind have been an issue, and obviously we didn't play well in those games. So I'm kind of with you guys. I'd rather we kind of get like the teams on equal footing. But I think the advantage that the Seahawks have is that it's not something that takes away their ability to play the game that they want to. Yes, Christian Michael's fumbling is always going to be a concern. He's only put 1 ball on the turf right now, and that's in the Rams game. So knock on wood that he keeps that up. But I think that the way that Jimmy Graham is playing, the way that Doug Baldwin is playing, they're so sure-handed. That 1 fumble that Jimmy Graham had, that was such a fluke play. I looked at the replay. I thought he had enough of the ball when he was going to the ground that it wasn't going to be called a fumble. Obviously, I was wrong. But I like that. I like Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett's supposed to be healthy. We haven't seen a healthy Tyler Lockett this year, and I think he has a real great ability to change the way that we play. Jermaine Kearse, he's been very sure-handed this year. He's caught everything thrown his way, that I can recall. So that's 4 great options receiving-wise, and outside of their corner, I don't know who else they have. They have Deshaun Goldson. They have Desmond Trufant. Desmond Trufant's been to a Pro Bowl, but I don't think that they have enough to cover Jimmy Graham. I don't know a single of their linebackers that's going to be able to do that in this kind of a weather. I think their skills can supersede that. They can take advantage of that weather. I'd rather it not be an issue, but I don't think I'm as worried about it as maybe you guys are, even though historically we definitely haven't seen the best out of Russell Wilson in those rainy games.
Yeah.
Let's just win this one straight up.
Yeah, just pound the ball. Run Christian Michael like 40 times, and get Caesar Spiller involved. Right?
Christian Michael, Jimmy Graham, Doug Baldwin, Tyler Lockett is healthy.
Yeah, I just hope that the weather's not bad enough that it takes us out of our game and forces us to do something different than we normally would. I mean, yeah, at the same time, it would be doing that to the Falcons as well. I just rather not see that happen. I'd like to have our full playbook open to us this weekend.
No, I agree. I think that would be what most fans would want to see. I don't think there's anyone out there that wants to see a sloppy game because, there's so many things that could bounce the wrong way, and all of a sudden, what looks like an easy play all of a sudden just changes the course of the game.
Yeah, I hate slop ball.
Yeah, for sure. All right, closing comments on the Falcons before we move on.
I love Julio.
Everyone.
Yeah, I love Quintoris, but I'm sure he'll have a great rest of the season. I'm predicting 60 yards or less for
Nice.
this
I
one.
like it. I like it.
Yeah, I see him getting targeted a ton, kind of like what happened to Brandon Marshall. I think maybe he'll get a few more catches, but I don't see him being able to burn. I definitely see them spying a little bit with Earl Thomas playing over to Richard Sherman's side if they can contain everything underneath. And KJ Wright and Bobby Wagner underneath, I don't think they're going to be able to get a lot if they try and go to the running backs in the flats or go to the running backs as an outlet. Those guys are too sure-handed. They're too quick to get to the running back that I don't think it's going to be as open as it was in the game against Denver.
Starting to think KJ Wright might be better than Bobby Wagner. We've got a couple of great guys in the middle there.
Yeah, for sure. They're both good, man. Who's got it better than us?
Yeah.
Watch out, Jeff. I might come after you.
I'll fight him. I don't even care.
All right, so we got our predictions. I think all of us are calling for a Seahawks win.
Yep.
All right.
Yeah,
I think.
Go ahead.
I think that I saw the line was actually 7, which seems big, but I'm going with that. So I'm taking the over.
I'm going to say it's an 8-point win, just like it was against the Steelers. I see this game playing out exactly like that game.
Yeah, 8-point sounds about right to me. And if the weather's good, if the weather's decent enough, I'm saying about 31-23, something like that. If the weather's shit, then who knows? Maybe it'll be like 16-14.
Yeah, for real. All right, well, that's the end here. I want to first thank Dustin for coming by and sharing, and then getting activated from the practice squad. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm only a phone call away, Coach.
First off, I want to give a couple shout-outs. First, thank you to Anthony for writing on Facebook. He wants to know why the Seahawks take so long to snap the damn ball. I mentioned on Facebook, it's about ball control. They want to control the clock. They want to control time of possession. They're waiting to snap the ball until the 5 is giving Russell Wilson time to look at the defense, scope it out, gets him ready for the next play. Do you guys have a quick thought on why the Seahawks take so long to snap the ball?
Yeah, I think it's mostly that's it. It's so that Russell can survey the defense, see maybe if we can get them to show their hand a little bit and what they're trying to do. It seems to be, and then I think the rhythm of it they get into where the timing just works out right. Every once in a while we push it a little too far and get that delay game, but mostly it works out good with just a couple of seconds left on the play clock.
Yeah,
I think it's because we've seen how bad Chip Kelly is in the NFL. We just want to do everything the opposite of how Chip Kelly would do it.
Yeah, I would say that's probably very likely. So on behalf of myself, our guest speaker Dustin Brown, and Zebulon Dak, thank you for tuning in today. I hope you guys have a wonderful week.
Hey, I got a couple of final thoughts. Can I
throw
a couple of final thoughts in real quick? I just wanted to bring up 2 quick little nuggets about quarterbacks in the Seahawks history. One is I wanted to mention Kelly Stouffer because he sucked. And that he has 19 career interceptions to 7 career touchdowns as a Seahawk. I don't know if he ever played for anybody else. He probably did, but yeah, that sucks. So shout out to Kelly Stouffer for sucking. And then I just wanted to mention real quick that the Seahawks all-time highest rated passer is none other than our very own, no longer our very own, formerly our very own Golden Tate with the perfect QB rating of 158.3.
That's the touchdown to Sidney Rice, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
He's the only guy. He's the only guy ever in the Seahawks to have a career perfect QB rating. So shout out to Golden Tate.
What happened to Golden Tate, man? He disappeared this season.
Yeah, he's not very good so far, is he?
Also, Tavares Jackson, best coin flipper in Seahawks history, probably.
By far.
He had a 99 rating in Madden on coin flipping. All right, so Dustin, final thoughts. Any shout outs?
I have no final thoughts other than this music you got on here is amazing, man. Thanks for sharing that with me.
So thank you for providing that. Thank you for anyone still listening live. Thank you for listening to us on YouTube and on our SoundCloud. Thank you to Seahawks.net for allowing us to host on the website as well. If you can, view us on Facebook, check us out. Zeb, any shout outs?
Go to triplebpodcast.com and listen to that madness. And shout out to Jesse Sponberg, PDX Don't Shoot, and all the good people down there occupying City Hall earlier today.
Yeah, if you don't know what Zeb's talking about, definitely check that out. It's a really interesting thing going on in the city of Portland right now.
Portland, Oregon, the whitest city in America.
Final shout out to our good friend Ross, who's not feeling well. We hope you feel better. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much for tuning in, and go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.